going to do this English-Spanish translation. Eventually I'm going to do a Spanish-only one. That'll be very difficult because a lot of this stuff doesn't translate well. This hopefully is something that you can present to maybe some of your Spanish-speaking patients to bridge some of the gap that we have between Spanish and English pronunciations and spellings. So I'm going to read everything in English and Spanish, and then eventually I'll do the Spanish-only one, but that one will take some time and take some more work. Okay. So again, I'm working from memorizing pharmacology, a relaxed approach. I've got a certain number of OTC drugs in there, and again, this is our introduction to the topic of memorizing pharmacy medications. Okay. So over-the-counter medications in the United States, medicamentos de venta libre, which means literally free medicine, and that's not what we mean, but sin receta might be a better way to say it, which means without prescription, or without recipe, which is what prescription means in los Estados Unidos. So memorizing pharmacology, como memorizar farmacología. Right. So the first issue is the drug classifications, because depending on the pharmacy you're in, you may have absolutely no signs showing where drugs are versus some signs which may have words like digestive or antacid, but an antacid sign might be over antacids, but it also might be over other types of medications like the proton pump inhibitors, Prilosec, things like that. Those signs aren't really helpful. What we want to do is give a translation that might be a little more meaningful, and you can see because of the vowel issues in Spanish versus English that they're going to be pronounced a little bit differently, and how the stems also take on this similar role of sometimes you lose the vowel or sometimes you gain it. Okay? So OTC drug classifications, clasificación de medicamentos de venta libre, and I'll keep using that venta libre, I just prefer it, but sin receta is just as right or correct. Gastrointestinal system, sistema gastrointestinal. Calcium carbonate is carbonato de calcio. Magnesium hydroxide is hidroxido de magnesio. Famotidine is famotidina. Ranitidine is ranitidina. And we see that the tidine, T-I-D-I-N-E, which indicates the H2 blocker class, becomes T-I-D-I-N-A. Okay. S-omeprazole. Esomeprazole becomes esomeprazole. Omeprazole becomes omeprazole. Okay. So again, we've lost this vowel, this E, but we see that there's still a similarity to the English and a similarity between the Spanish versions. Okay. Bismuth subsalicylate becomes subsalicilato de bismuto, and this again is where Spanish and English, we say one is backwards, they're just inverted. So in English, we'll say the red car, and the adjective comes first, red comes before car. Here, the what describes it comes second. So literally in Spanish, it's subsalicylate of bismuth, okay, where the adjective comes second. Okay. So loperamide becomes loperamida. Docusate sodium becomes docusato de sodio. Same thing here, where because we've used the Latin docusate sodium to talk about the salt, it actually agrees, of salt. Okay. Polyethylene glycol, and this is just a change in lettering, but it's going to be pronounced very similar. Polyethylene glycol, 3350. So the 3350, I just left off the English version, but again, you just change the spelling, but the pronunciation is very similar. So OTC classifications, again, clasificación de medicamentos de venta libre o sin receta. Musculoskeletal system, sistema osteomuscular. So literally that means musculoskeletal, and I put a drug in here that's a headache medicine. So if you say Excedrin is in the musculoskeletal system, it's not exactly right. The acetaminophen with aspirin and caffeine, but it was the best place for me to put it. There's not really, you could put it under neuro, but let's look at these drugs. So aspirin regular becomes aspirina normal. Ibuprofen becomes ibuprofeno. Naproxen becomes naproxeno. Acetaminophen becomes acetaminofeno. And then acetaminophen, aspirin, caffeine becomes acetaminofeno, aspirina, and caffeina. So very similar, but again respecting the Spanish vowel endings here. Okay. Respiratory system, so sistema respiratorio. So diphenhydramine becomes diphenhydramina. Cetirizine becomes cetirizina. Loratadine becomes loratadina. And loratadine D becomes loratadina D. So again, we've got this change in the stem, which is very similar to what it originally is in the English. Okay. Pseudoephedrine becomes pseudoephedrina. Phenylephrine becomes phenylephrina. Oxymetazoline becomes oxymetazolina. Triamcinolone becomes triamcinolona. Guaifenesin with dextromethorphan becomes guiafenicina con dextrometorfano. And again, we've kind of taken the English word and made it much easier to pronounce for the Spanish speaker. OTC drug classifications, clasificaciones de medicamentos de venta libre, immune system, sistema immune. Okay. So neomycin with polymyxin B with bacitracin becomes neomycina con polymyxina B con bacitracina, and butenafine becomes butenafina. Docosanol is awesome because it's the same, docosanol. What it does, the reason why it works so well is that you have this vowel, D-O-C-O-S-A, and then the N-O-L is perfectly proper in Spanish, so it actually works out pretty well. Influenza vaccine, vacuna antigripal. Okay. And then let's go into the neurologic system, so sistema neurológico. So benzocaine becomes benzocaina. Lidocaine becomes lidocaina. And meclizine becomes meclizina. And acetaminophen becomes, or acetaminophen PM becomes acetaminofeno PM. Okay, so OTC drug classifications, page 4, clasificación de medicamentos de venta libre, página 4. Cardiovascular system, sistema cardiovascular. So omega-3 fatty ethyl esters become esteros etílicos del ácido omega-3. And again, we're using this kind of adjectival description, and they're nouns, we won't get into it, but basically the descriptor will come in a different place. So it's just understanding that the omega-3 fatty ethyl esters gets turned around. But you can see if you look at it, you see two words that start with E on the left. They got moved. So it's kind of similar, but just know that those got reversed. Niacin becomes niacina. Aspirin low dose becomes aspirina, dosis reducida. And that's important because the patient might just be excited that they found aspirin, what they were looking for, but to understand that we have those two different doses, and I'll talk about them during the actual presentation. Then endocrine system, sistema endocrino. Regular insulin, insulina normal. And then NPH insulin, insulina NPH. And then levonorgestrel, I'm going to say I think that one worked out the same too. Levonorgestrel. Okay, so just the way that the vowels work out, it comes out okay. All right, so let's actually stop here. That was 10 minutes, and what I'll do is I'll continue on a next slide describing the individual drugs and the issues you might have with a Spanish-speaking patient that you can hopefully connect a little bit better.